Planetary Symbolism articles by H. P. Blavatsky. What's in a name? The history of a planet star angel worship in the Roman Catholic Church. Stars and numbers. H. P. Blavatsky Series Number 21 Theosophy Company, Mysore, Private Ltd Bangalore 560,004. Objects of the Theosophical movement I to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color, 2 the study of ancient and modern religions, philosophies, and sciences, and the demonstration of the importance of such study, and 3 the investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the psychical powers latent in man. Tresaces T *p Iljali. The articles of H. P. Blavatsky and W. Q. Judge, which originally appeared in the Theosophist, Lucifer, and the Path, were issued in pamphlet form by the Theosophy Company, Los Angeles, USA. For the benefit of students and inquirers in India, these are now being reprinted in an Indian edition. Reprint edition, 1984 by courtesy, the Theosophy Company, 245, West 33rd St., Los Angeles, California. 90007, USA. Printed by V. N. Iyer at Commercial Printing House, 41/1, 3rd Main Road, Gandhinagar, Bangalore 560,009 and published by J. M. Tijoriwala for Theosophy Company, Mysore, Private Limited, 4, Sir Krishna Rao Road, Basavangudi, Bangalore 560,004. Forward. In the preface to Isis Unveiled, her first published work, 1877, H. P. Blavatsky gave as one of her purposes a restitution of borrowed robes and the vindication of calumniated but glorious reputations. 10 years later, when she began publishing Lucifer in England, September, 1887, her opening editorial discussion of the name of this theosophical magazine was quite evidently a continuation of that purpose. Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star, had been given a bad name by medieval Christian theology, and as H.P.B. explained in her editorial, "What's in a name?" the fear that prejudice might prevent some people from reading a magazine titled Lucifer was not a reason for changing its name. On the contrary, the magazine was founded to correct just such misconceptions. "What's in a name?" is the statement of an editorial position and policy. In the same September, 1887 issue of Lucifer she published another article, The History of a Planet, which provides a clear light on how the ancients regarded the planet Venus, or Lucifer. Called because of its radiance a second sun by Pythagoras, Venus was assigned divine qualities by the Greeks and the Romans, while the Egyptians identified the planet with Isis and made the crux ansata, or Ankh, its symbol. The association of Lucifer-Venus with Satan was part of the general process by which all the Greco-Aryan gods were transformed into Semitic devils, through theological inventions to uphold superstition. In this article HPB shows that Lucifer-Venus is a sacred planet, and no synonym of Satan. The editorial note introducing star angel worship in the Roman Catholic Church, which appeared in Lucifer for July, 1888, has particular importance. The reason for exposing the curious bit of religious history with which this article deals, HPB explains, is the charge by Roman Catholics that Theosophists worship planetary spirits and star angels. After pointing out that Theosophists recognize the existence of such high beings, but do not worship them, although holding them in reverence, she shows that Roman Catholicism has in some of its branches practiced a veritable polytheism, and, while little known, the worship of star angels in the Catholic Church had not in fact been abolished. After all, the Virgin Mary, she points out, is a regular goddess. Those who are led to wonder about the theosophical teaching in relation to these matters would do well to turn to The Secret Doctrine, a work in which the part played in universal evolution by planetary spirits and hyanic intelligences called star angels by theological writers is dealt with in detail. Much is explained about Venus, also, in that work. Stars and Numbers, a consideration of the implications of astrology, was published by H.P.B. in the Theosophist for June, 1881. In this article she shows the universal respect for the science of astrology of ancient thinkers, and gives examples of extraordinary planetary conjunctions which marked grave historical events. The article concludes with some illustrations of Kabbalistic reckoning, and finally the suggestion that those who believe in another world besides the visible one, and in non-material forces, can hardly ignore the reality of an occult science of number. What's in a name? Why the magazine is called Lucifer? What's in a name? Very often there is more in it than the profane is prepared to understand, or the learned mystic to explain. It is an invisible, secret, but very potential influence that every name carries about with it and leaveth wherever it goeth. Carlyle thought that there is much, nay, almost all, in names. Could I unfold the influence of names, which are the most important of all clothings, I were a second great Trismegistus, he writes. The name or title of a magazine started with a definite object, is, therefore, all important, for it is, indeed, the invisible seed grain, which will either grow to be an all-overshadowing tree on the fruits of which must depend the nature of the results brought about by the said object, or the tree will wither and die. These considerations show that the name of the present magazine, rather equivocal to orthodox Christian ears, is due to no careless selection, but arose in consequence of much thinking over its fitness, and was adopted as the best symbol to express that object and the results in view. Now, the first and most important, if not the sole object of the magazine, is expressed in the line from the first epistle to the Corinthians, on its title page. It is to bring light to the hidden things of darkness, 4:5, to show in their true aspect and their original real meaning things and names, men, and their doings and customs. It is finally to fight prejudice, hypocrisy, and shams in every nation, in every class of society, as in every department of life. The task is a laborious one, but it is neither impracticable nor useless, if even as an experiment. Thus, for an attempt of such nature, no better title could ever be found than the one chosen. Lucifer is the pale morning star, the precursor of the full blaze of the noonday sun, the Eosphoros of the Greeks. It shines timidly at dawn to gather forces and dazzle the eye after sunset as its own brother Hesperos. The radiant evening star, or the planet Venus. No fitter symbol exists for the proposed work that of throwing a ray of truth on everything hidden by the darkness of prejudice, by social or religious misconceptions, especially by that idiotic routine in life, which, once that a certain action, a thing, a name, has been branded by slanderous inventions, however unjust, makes respectable people, so-called, turn away shiveringly, refusing to even look at it from any other aspect than the one sanctioned by public opinion. Such an endeavor, then, to force the weak-hearted to look truth straight in the face, is helped most efficaciously by a title belonging to the category of branded names. Piously inclined readers may argue that Lucifer is accepted by all the churches as one of the many names of the devil. According to Milton's superb fiction, Lucifer is Satan, the rebellious angel, the enemy of God and man. If one analyzes his rebellion, however, it will be found of no worse nature than an assertion of free will and independent thought, as if Lucifer had been born in the sixth century. This epithet of rebellious is a theological calumny, on a par with that other slander of God by the predestinarians, one that makes of deity an almighty fiend worse than the rebellious spirit himself, an omnipotent Devi, desiring to be complimented as all-merciful when he is exerting the most fiendish cruelty, as put by J. Cotter Morrison. Both the foreordaining and predestining fiend God, and his subordinate agent are of human invention. They are two of the most morally repulsive and horrible theological dogmas that the nightmares of light-hating monks have ever evolved out of their unclean fancies. They date from the medieval age, the period of mental obscuration, during which most of the present prejudices and superstitions have been forcibly inoculated on the human mind, so as to have become nearly ineradicable in some cases, one of which is the present prejudice now under discussion. So deeply rooted, indeed, is this perconception and aversion to the name of Lucifer, meaning no worse than light-bringer, from lux, lucus, light, and fair to bring, one even among the educated classes, that by adopting it for the title of their one it was Gregory the Great who was the first to apply this passage of Isaiah. How art thou fallen from heaven, Lucifer, son of the morning, etc., to Satan, and ever since the bold metaphor of the prophet, which referred, after all but to an Assyrian king inimical to the Israelites, has been applied to the devil. Magazine. The editors have the prospect of a long strife with public prejudice before them. So absurd and ridiculous is that prejudice, indeed, that no one has seemed to ever ask himself the question, how came Satan to be called a light-bringer, unless the silvery rays of the morning star can in any way be made suggestive of the glare of the infernal flames. It is simply, as Henderson showed, one of those gross perversions of sacred writ which so extensively obtain, and which are to be traced to a proneness to seek for more in a given passage than it really contains, a disposition to be influenced by sound rather than sense, and an implicit faith in received interpretation, which is not quite one of the weaknesses of our present age. Nevertheless, the prejudice is there, to the shame of our century. This cannot be helped. The two editors would hold themselves as recreants in their own sight, as traitors to the very spirit of the proposed work, were they to yield and cry craven before the danger. If one would fight prejudice, and brush off the ugly cobwebs of superstition and materialism alike from the noblest ideals of our forefathers, one has to prepare for opposition. The crown of the reformer and the innovator is a crown of thorns indeed. If one would rescue truth in all her chaste nudity from the almost bottomless well, into which she has been hurled by cant and hypocritical propriety, one should not hesitate to descend into the dark, gaping pit of that well. No matter how badly the blind bats the dwellers in darkness, and the hollers of light may treat in their gloomy abode the intruder, unless one is the first to show the spirit and courage he preaches to others, he must be justly held as a hypocrite and a seceder from his own principles. Hardly had the title been agreed upon, when the first premonitions of what was in store for us, in the matter of the opposition to be encountered owing to the title chosen, appeared on our horizon. One of the editors received and recorded some spicy objections. The scenes that follow are sketches from nature. A well-known novelist. Tell me about your new magazine. What class do you propose to appeal to? Editor. No class in particular, we intend to appeal to the public. Novelist. I am very glad of that. For once I shall be one of the public, for I don't understand your subject in the least, and I want to. But you must remember that if your public is to understand you, it must necessarily be a very small one. People talk about occultism nowadays as they talk about many other things, without the least idea of what it means. We are so ignorant and so prejudiced. Editor. Exactly. That is what calls the new magazine into existence. We propose to educate you. And to tear the mask from every prejudice. Novelist. That really is good news to me, for I want to be educated. What is your magazine to be called? Editor. Lucifer. Novelist. What? Are you going to educate us in vice? We know enough about that. Fallen angels are plentiful. You may find popularity, for soiled doves are in fashion just now, while the white-winged angels are voted a bore, because they are not so amusing. But I doubt your being able to teach us much. To a man of the Iforld, in a careful undertone, for the scene is a dinner party. I hear you are going to start a magazine, all about occultism. Do you know, I'm very glad. I don't say anything about such matters as a rule, but some queer things have happened in my life which can't be explained in any ordinary manner. I hope you will go in for explanations. Editor. We shall try, certainly. My impression is, that when occultism is in any measure apprehended, its laws are accepted by everyone as the only intelligible explanation of life. AMW. Just so, I want to know all about it, for PON my honor, life's a mystery. There are plenty of other people as curious as myself. This is an age which is afflicted with the Yankee disease of wanting to know. I'll get you lots of subscribers. What's the magazine called? Editor. Lucifer and, warned by former experience, don't misunderstand the name. It is typical of the divine spirit which sacrificed itself for humanity. It was Milton's doing that it ever became associated with the devil. We are sworn enemies to popular prejudices, and it is quite appropriate that we should attack such a prejudice as this. Lucifer, you know, is the morning star, the light bearer. AMW, interrupting. Oh, I know all that. At least I don't know, but I take it for granted you've got some good reason for taking such a title. But your first object is to have readers. You want the public to buy your magazine, I suppose. That's in the program, isn't it? Editor. Most decidedly. AMW. Well, listen to the advice of a man who knows his way about town. Don't mark your magazine with the wrong color at starting. It's quite evident, when one stays an instant to think of its derivation and meaning, that Lucifer is an excellent word. But the public don't stay to think of derivations and meanings, and the first impression is the most important. Nobody will buy the magazine if you call it Lucifer. A fashionable lady interested in occultism. I want to hear some more about the new magazine, for I have interested a great many people in it, even with the little you have told me. But I find it difficult to express its actual purpose. What is it? Editor. To try and give a little light to those that want it? AFL. Well, that's a simple way of putting it, and will be very useful to me. What is the magazine to be called? Editor. Lucifer. AFL, after a pause, you can't mean it? Editor. Why not? AFL. The associations are so dreadful. What can be the object of calling it that? It sounds like some unfortunate sort of joke, made against it by its enemies. Editor. Oh, but Lucifer, you know, means light bearer. It is typical of the divine spirit. AFL. Never mind all that. I want to do your magazine good and make it known, and you can't expect me to enter into explanations of that sort every time I mention the title? Impossible. Life is too short and too busy. Besides, it would produce such a bad effect, people would think me priggish, and then I couldn't talk at all, for I couldn't bear them to think that. Don't call it Lucifer, please don't. Nobody knows what the word is typical of. What it means now is the devil, nothing more or less. Editor. But then that is quite a mistake, and one of the first prejudices we propose to do battle with. Lucifer is the pale, pure herald of dawn. Lady, interrupting. I thought you were going to do something more interesting and more important than to whitewash mythological characters. We shall all have to go to school again, or read up Drive. Smith's Classical Dictionary. And what is the use of it when it is done? One thought you were going to tell us things about our own lives and how to make them better. 1. Suppose Milton wrote about Lucifer, didn't he? But nobody reads Milton now. Do let us have a modern title with some human meaning in it. For a journalist, thoughtfully, while rolling his cigarette. Yes, it is a good idea, this magazine of yours. We shall all laugh at it, as a matter of course, and we shall cut it up in the papers. But we shall all read it, because secretly everybody hungers after the mysterious. What are you going to call it? Editor. Lucifer. Journalist, striking a light. Why not the Fusee? Quite as good a title and not so pretentious. The novelist, the man of the world, the fashionable lady, and the journalist, should be the first to receive a little instruction. A glimpse into the real and primitive character of Lucifer can do them no harm and may, perchance, cure them of a bit of ridiculous prejudice. They ought to study their Homer and Hesiod's Theogony if they would do justice to Lucifer, Aeosphoros, and Hesperos, the morning and the evening beautiful star. If there are more useful things to do in this life than to whitewash mythological characters, to slander and blacken them is, at least, as useless, and shows, moreover, a narrow-mindedness which can do honor to no one. To object to the title of Lucifer, only because its associations are so dreadful, is pardonable if it can be pardonable in any case only in an ignorant American missionary of some dissenting sect, in one whose natural laziness and lack of education led him to prefer plowing the minds of heathens, as ignorant as he is himself, to the more profitable, but rather more arduous, process of plowing the fields of his own father's farm. In the English clergy, however, who receive all a more or less classical education, and are, therefore, supposed to be acquainted with the ins and outs of theological sophistry and casuistry, this kind of opposition is absolutely unpardonable. It not only smacks of hypocrisy and deceit, but places them directly on a lower moral level than him they call the apostate angel. By endeavoring to show the theological Lucifer, fallen through the idea that to reign is world ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, they are virtually putting into practice the supposed crime they would fain accuse him of. They prefer reigning over the spirit of the masses by means of a pernicious dark lie, productive of many an evil, than serve heaven by serving truth. Such practices are worthy only of the Jesuits. But their sacred writ is the first to contradict their interpretations and the association of Lucifer, the morning star, with Satan. Chapter XXII of Revelation, verse 16, says, I, Jesus am the root and the bright and morning star, opt vos early rising hence eis feras, or the Latin Lucifer. The opprobrium attached to this name is of such a very late date, that the Roman Church found itself forced to screen the theological slander behind a two-sided interpretation as usual. Christ, we are told, is the morning star, the divine Lucifer, and Satan the usurpator of the verbum, the infernal Lucifer. The great archangel Michael, the conqueror of Satan, is identical in paganism aid with Mercury Mithra, to whom, after defending the sun, symbolical of God, from the attacks of Venus Lucifer, was given the possession of this planet, et, datus estei locus Luciferi. And since the archangel Michael is the angel of the face, and the vicar of the verbum, he is now considered in the Roman Church as the regent of that planet Venus which the vanquished fiend had usurped. Angelus facii dei sedum superbi humilis. Obtinude, says Cornelius a Lapide, in volume 6, p. 229. This gives the reason why one of the early popes was called Lucifer, as Jansch, and ecclesiastical records prove it. Thus follows that the title chosen for our magazine is as much associated with divine and pious ideas as with the supposed rebellion of the hero of Milton's Paradise Lost. By choosing it, we throw the first ray of light and truth on a ridiculous prejudice which ought to have no room made for it in this our age of facts and discovery. We work for true religion and science, in the interest of fact as against fiction and prejudice. It is our duty, as it is that of physical science professedly its mission, to throw light on facts in nature hitherto surrounded by the darkness of ignorance. And since ignorance is justly regarded as the chief promoter of superstition, that work is, therefore, a noble and beneficent work. But natural sciences are only one aspect of science and truth. To Merville's Memoirs to the Academy of France, Volume 4, quoting Cardinal Ventura. 3. Which paganism has passed long millenniums, it would seem, in copying beforehand Christian dogmas to come. Psychological and moral sciences, or theosophy, the knowledge of divine truth, wheresoever found, are still more important in human affairs, and real science should not be limited simply to the physical aspect of life and nature. Science is an abstract of every fact, a comprehension of every truth within the scope of human research and intelligence. Shakespeare's deep and accurate science in mental philosophy, Coleridge, has proved more beneficent to the true philosopher in the study of the human heart, therefore, in the promotion of truth, than the more accurate, but certainly less deep, science of any fellow of the Royal Institution. Those readers, however, who do not find themselves convinced that the Church had no right to throw a slur upon a beautiful star, and that it did so through a mere necessity of accounting for one of its numerous loans from paganism with all its poetical conceptions of the truths in nature, are asked to read our article The History of a Planet. Perhaps, after its perusal, they will see how far Dupuy was justified in asserting that all the theologies have their origin in astronomy. With the modern Orientalists every myth is solar. This is one more prejudice, and a preconception in favor of materialism and physical science. It will be one of our duties to combat it with much of the rest. The history of a planet no star, among the countless myriads that twinkle over the sidereal fields of the night sky, shines so dazzlingly as the planet Venus. Not even Sirius Sothis, the dog star, beloved by Isis. Venus is the queen among our planets, the crown jewel of our solar system. She is the inspirer of the poet, the guardian and companion of the lonely shepherd, the lovely morning and the evening star. For, stars teach as well as shine, although their secrets are still untold and unrevealed to the majority of men, including astronomers. They are a beauty and a mystery, verily. But where there is a mystery, it is generally supposed that there must also be evil, says Byron. Evil, therefore, was detected by evilly disposed human fancy, even in those bright luminous eyes peeping at our wicked world through the veil of ether. Thus there came to exist slandered stars and planets as well as slandered men and women. Too often are the reputation and fortune of one man or party sacrificed for the benefit of another man or party. As on earth below, so in the heavens above, and Venus, the sister planet of our earth, one was sacrificed to the ambition of our little globe to show the latter the chosen planet of the Lord. She became the scapegoat, the Azachael of the starry dome, for the sins of the earth, or rather for those of a certain class in the human family, the clergy, who slandered the bright orb, in order to prove what their ambition suggested to them as the best means to reach power, and exercise it unswervingly over the superstitious and ignorant masses. This took place during the Middle Ages. And now the sin lies. One Venus is a second Earth / says Raynaud, in Terre et del. p. 74, so much so that were there any communication possible between the two planets, here inhabitants might take their respective Earths for the two hemispheres of the same world. They seem on the sky, like two sisters. Similar in conformation, these two worlds are also similar in the character assigned to them in the universe. Black at the door of Christians and their scientific inspirers, though the error was successfully raised to the lofty position of a religious dogma, as many other fictions and inventions have been. Indeed, the whole sidereal world, planets and their regents, the ancient gods of poetical paganism, the sun, the moon, the elements, and the entire host of incalculable worlds, those at least which happen to be known to the Church Fathers, shared in the same fate. They have all been slandered, all bedeviled by the insatiable desire of proving one little system of theology built on and constructed out of old pagan materials the only right and holy one, and all those which preceded or followed it utterly wrong. Sun and stars, the very air itself, we are asked to believe, became pure and redeemed from original sin and the satanic element of heathenism, only after the year I-80. Scholastics and scholiasts, the spirit of whom spurned laborious investigation and slow induction, had shown, to the satisfaction of infallible Church, the whole cosmos in the power of Satan, a poor compliment to God before the year of the Nativity, and Christians had to believe or be condemned. Never have subtle sophistry and casuistry shown themselves so plainly in their true light, however, as in the questions of the ex-Satanism and later redemption of various heavenly bodies. Poor beautiful Venus got worsted in that war of so-called divine proofs to a greater degree than any of her sidereal colleagues. While the history of the other 6 planets, and their gradual transformation from Greco-Aryan gods into Semitic devils, and finally into divine attributes of the 7 eyes of the Lord, is known but to the educated, that of Venus Lucifer has become a household story among even the most illiterate in Roman Catholic countries. This story shall now be told for the benefit of those who may have neglected their astral mythology. Venus, characterized by Pythagoras as the sole altar, a second sun, on account of her magnificent radiance equaled by none other, was the first to draw the attention of ancient theogonists. Before it began to be called Venus, it was known in pre-Hesiodic theogony as Eosphoros, or Phosphorus, and Hesperos, the children of the dawn and twilight. In Hesiod, moreover, the planet is decomposed into two divine beings, two brothers, Eosphoros, the Lucifer of the Latins, the morning, and Hesperos, the evening star. They are the children of Astrasios and Eos, the starry heaven and the dawn, as also of Kephalos and Eos, Theog, 381. Hyg. Poet. Astron 11, 42. Preller, quoted by Descartes, shows Phaeton identical with Phosphorus or Lucifer, Grech. Mythol, I, 365. And on the authority of Hesiod he also makes Phaeton the son of the latter two divinities Kephalos and Eos. Now Phaeton or Phosphorus, the luminous morning orb, is carried away in his early youth by Aphrodite, Venus, who makes of him the night guardian of her sanctuary, Theog, 987,991. He is the beautiful morning star, vide St. John's Revelation XXII 16, loved for its radiant light by the goddess of the dawn, Aurora, who, while gradually eclipsing the light of her beloved, thus seeming to carry off the star, makes it reappear on the evening horizon where it watches the gates of heaven. In early morning, Phosphorus, issuing from the waters of the ocean, raises in heaven his sacred head to announce the approach of divine light. Iliad, XXIII. 226, Otis, 13. 93, Virg, /Ennead, 8. 589, Mythol de la Grèce antique, 247. He holds a torch in his hand and flies through space as he precedes the car of Aurora. In the evening he becomes Hesperos, the most splendid of the stars that shine on the celestial vault. Iliad, XXII 317. He is the father of the Hesperides, the guardians of the golden apples, together with the dragon, the beautiful genius of the flowing golden curls, sung and glorified in all the ancient epithalami. The bridal songs of the early Christians as of the pagan Greeks, he, who at the fall of the night, leads the nuptial cortege and delivers the bride into the arms of the bridegroom. Carmen nuptial. See Mythol de la Grèce antique. Descartes. So far, there seems to be no possible rapprochement, no analogy to be discovered between this poetical personification of a star, a purely astronomical myth, and the Satanism of Christian theology. True, the close connection between the planet as Hesperos, the evening star, and the Greek Garden of Eden with its dragon and the golden apples may, with a certain stretch of imagination, suggest some painful comparisons with the third chapter of Genesis. But this is insufficient to justify the building of a theological wall of defense against paganism made up of slander and misrepresentations. But of all the Greek euhemerizations, Luciferiasphoros is, perhaps, the most complicated. The planet has become with the Latins, Venus, or Aphrodite Anadyomene, the foam-born goddess, the divine mother, and one with the Phoenician Astarte, or the Jewish Astaroth. They were all called the morning star, and the virgins of the sea, or Mar, whence Mary, the great deep, titles now given by the Roman Church to their Virgin Mary. They were all connected with the moon and the crescent, with the dragon and the planet Venus, as the mother of Christ has been made connected with all these attributes. If the Phoenician mariners carried, fixed on the prow of their ships, the image of the goddess Astarte, or Aphrodite, Venus Erycina, and looked upon the evening and the morning star as their guiding star, the eye of their goddess mother, so do the Roman Catholic sailors the same to this day. They fix a Madonna on the prows of their vessels, and the Blessed Virgin Mary is called the Virgin of the Sea. The accepted patroness of Christian sailors, their star, Stella del Mar, etc., she stands on the crescent moon. Like the old pagan goddesses, she is the Queen of Heaven, and the morning star just as they were. Whether this can explain anything, is left to the reader's sagacity. Meanwhile, Lucifer Venus has naught to do with darkness, and everything with light. When called Lucifer, it is the light bringer, the first radiant beam which destroys the lethal darkness of night. When named Venus, the planet star becomes the symbol of dawn, the chaste aurora. Professor Max Muller rightly conjectures that Aphrodite, born of the sea, is a personification of the dawn of day, and the most lovely of all the sights in nature, science of language, for, before her naturalization by the Greeks, Aphrodite was nature personified, the life and light of the pagan world, as proven in the beautiful invocation to Venus by Lucretius, quoted by Descartes. She is divine nature in her entirety, Aditi Prakriti, before she becomes Lakshmi. She is that nature before whose majestic and fair face, the winds fly away, the quieted sky pours torrents of light, and the sea waves smile, Lucretius. When referred to as the Syrian goddess Astarte, the Astaroth of Hierapolis, the radiant planet was personified as a majestic woman, holding in one outstretched hand a torch, in the other, a crooked staff in the form of a cross. Vide Lucian's De Dea Syriae, and Cicero's De Nat Deorum 3c23. Finally, the planet is represented astronomically, as a globe poised above the cross, a symbol no devil would like to associate with, while the planet Earth is a globe with a cross over it. But then, these crosses are not the symbols of Christianity, but the Egyptian crux ansata, the attribute of Isis, who is Venus, and Aphrodite, nature, also, or Venus the planet. The fact that the Earth has the crux ansata reversed, it having a great occult significance upon which there is no necessity of entering at present. Now what says the Church, and how does it explain the dreadful association? The Church believes in the devil, of course, and could not afford to lose him. The devil is the chief pillar of the Church, confesses unblushingly and advocate two of the Ecclesia Militans. All the Alexandrian Gnostics speak to us of the fall of the Achans and their pleroma, and all attribute that fall to the desire to know, writes another volunteer in the same army, slandering the Gnostics as usual and identifying the desire to know or occultism, magic, with Satanism. 8. And then, forthwith, he quotes from Schlegel's Philosophique de l'Historique to show that the 7 rectors, planets, of Pymander, commissioned by God to contain the phenomenal world in their 7 circles, lost in love with their own beauty, for came to admire themselves with such intensity that owing to this proud self-adulation they finally fell. Perversity having thus found its way amongst the angels, the most beautiful creature of God revolted against its maker. That creature is in theological fancy Venus Lucifer, or rather the informing spirit or regent of that planet. This teaching is based on the following speculation. The 3 principal heroes of the great sidereal catastrophe mentioned in Revelation are, according to the testimony of the Church Fathers, the Verbum, Lucifer his usurper, see editorial, and the grand archangel who conquered him, and whose palaces, the houses astrology calls them, are in the Sun, Venus, Lucifer, and Mercury. This is quite evident, since the position of these orbs in the solar system correspond in their hierarchical order to that of the heroes in chapter 12 of Revelation, their names and destinies, being closely connected in the theological, exoteric, system with these 3 great metaphysical names. De Mervelly's memoir to the Academy of France, on the rapping spirits and the demons, the outcome of this was, that theological legend made of Venus Lucifer the sphere and domain of the fallen archangel, or Satan. 2. Thus saith de Musso. Msers et pratiques des demons px, and he is corroborated in this by Cardinal de Ventura. The devil, he says, is one of the great personages whose life is closely allied to that of the Church, and without him, the fall of man could not have taken place. If it were not for him, the devil, the Savior, the Redeemer, the crucified would be but the most ridiculous of supernumeraries, and the cross an insult to good sense. And if so, then we should feel thankful to the poor devil. 3. De Merville. No devil, no Christ, he exclaims. For this is only another version of Narcissus, the Greek victim of his own fair looks. Before his apostasy, called upon to reconcile this statement with that other fact, that the metaphor of the morning star, is applied to both Jesus, and his Virgin Mother, and that the planet Venus Lucifer is included, moreover, among the stars of the 7 planetary spirits worshipped by the Roman Catholics 8 on. Their new names, the defenders of the Latin dogmas and beliefs answer as follows: Lucifer, the jealous neighbor of the sun, Christ, said to himself in his great pride, I will rise as high as he. He was thwarted in his design by Mercury, though the brightness of the latter, who is St. Michael, was as much lost in the blazing fires of the great solar orb as his own was, and though, like Lucifer, Mercury is only the assessor, and the guard of honor to the Sunday. Ibid, guards of dishonor now rather, if the teachings of theological Christianity were true. But here comes in the cloven foot of the Jesuit. The ardent defender of Roman Catholic demonolatry and of the worship of the 7 planetary spirits, at the same time, pretends great wonder at the coincidences between old pagan and Christian legends, between the fable about Mercury and Venus, and the historical truths told of St. Michael the angel of the face, the terrestrial double, or fairer of Christ. He points them out saying, like Mercury, the archangel Michael, is the friend of the sun, his Mitra, perhaps, for Michael is a psychopompic genius, one who leads the separated souls to their appointed abodes, and like Mitra, he is the well-known adversary of the demons. This is demonstrated by the Book of the Nabateans recently discovered, by Coulson, in which the Zoroastrian Mitra is called the grand enemy of the planet Venus. 6. Ibid p. 160. 5. The famous temple dedicated to the 7 angels at Rome, and built by Michelangelo in 1561, is still there, now called the Church of St. Mary of the Angels. In the old Roman missals printed in 1563, one or two of which may still be seen in Palazzo Barberini, one may find the religious service, officio, of the 7 angels, and their old and occult names. That the angels are the pagan rectors, under different names, the Jewish having replaced the Greek and Latin names of the 7 planets, is proven by what Pope Pius V said in his bull to the Spanish clergy, permitting and encouraging the worship of the said 7 spirits of the stars. One cannot exalt too much these 7 rectors of the world, figured by the 7 planets, as it is consoling to our century to witness by the grace of God the cult of these 7 ardent lights, and of these 7 stars reassuming all its luster in the Christian Republic. Les Septembre. Esprits et histoire de leur culte de Mervelly's second memoir addressed to the Academy. Volume 2. p. 358. 6. Herodotus showing the identity of Mitra and Venus. The sentence in the Nabatean Agriculture is evidently misunderstood. There is something in this. A candid confession, for once, of perfect identity of celestial personages and of borrowing from every pagan source. It is curious, if unblushing. While in the oldest Mazdine allegories, Mitra conquers the planet Venus, in Christian tradition Michael defeats Lucifer, and both receive, as war spoils, the planet of the vanquished deity. Mitra, says Dollinger, possessed, in days of old, the star of Mercury, placed between the sun and the moon, but he was given the planet of the conquered, and ever since his victory he is identified with Venus. Judaism and Paganism, Vol. 2, p. 109. French translate. In the Christian tradition, adds the learned Marquis, Saint Michael is apportioned in heaven the throne and the palace of the foe he has vanquished. Moreover, like Mercury, during the palmy days of paganism, which made sacred to this demigod all the promontories of the earth, the archangel is the patron of the same in our religion. This means, if it does mean anything, that now, at any rate, Lucifer Venus is a sacred planet, and no synonym of Satan, since Saint Michael has become his legal heir? The above remarks conclude with this cool reflection: it is evident that paganism has utilized beforehand, and most marvelously, all the features and characteristics of the Prince of the Face of the Lord, Michael, in applying them to that Mercury. To the Egyptian Hermes Anubis, and the Hermes Christos of the Gnostics. Each of these was represented as the first among the divine counselors, and the god nearest to the sun, quis ut Deus. Which title, with all its attributes, became that of Michael. The good fathers, the master masons of the temple of church Christianity, knew indeed how to utilize pagan material for their new dogmas. The fact is, that it is sufficient to examine certain Egyptian cartouches, pointed out by Rossellini, Egypt, Vol. I, p. 289, to find Mercury, the double of Sirius in our solar system, as Sothis, preceded by the word sol and solus custode, sostenon dei dominant I, e forte grande dei vigilante, watchman of the sun, sustainer of dominions, and the strongest of all the vigilants. All these titles and attributes are now those of the archangel Michael, who has inherited them from the demons of paganism. Moreover, travelers in Rome may testify to the wonderful presence in the statue of Mitra, at the Vatican, of the best known Christian symbols. Mystics boast of it. They find in his lion's head, and the eagle's wings, those of the courageous seraph, the master of space, Michael, in his caduceus, the spear, in the two serpents coiled round the body, the struggle of the good and bad principles, and especially in the two keys which the said Mitra holds, like Saint Peter, the keys with which the seraph patron of the latter opens and shuts the gates of heaven, astrocluded et recluded. Mem. p. 162. To sum up, the aforesaid shows that the theological romance of Lucifer was built upon the various myths and allegories of the pagan world, and that it is no revealed dogma, but simply one invented to uphold superstition. Mercury being one of the sun's assessors, or the cynocephali of the Egyptians and the watchdogs of the sun, literally, the other was Eos Pharos, the most brilliant of the planets, Ki main Oribares, the early rising, or the Greek Optvos. It was identical with the Amunare, the light-bearer of Egypt, and called by all nations the second-born of light, the first being Mercury, the beginning of his, the sun's, ways of wisdom, the archangel Michael being also referred to as the Principium Virum Domini. Thus a purely astronomical personification, built upon an occult meaning which no one has hitherto seemed to unriddle outside the Eastern wisdom, has now become a dogma, part and parcel of Christian revelation. A clumsy transference of characters is unequal to the task of making thinking people accept in one and the same Trinitarian group, the Word or Jesus, God and Michael, with the Virgin occasionally to complete it, on the one hand, and Mitra, Satan, and Apollo Abaddon on the other, the whole at the whim and pleasure of Roman Catholic scholiasts. If Mercury and Venus, Lucifer, are, astronomically in their revolution around the sun, the symbols of God the Father, the Son, and of their vicar, Michael, the dragon conqueror, in Christian legend, why should they when called Apollo/Bad Dawn, the king of the abyss, Lucifer, Satan, or Venus become forthwith devils and demons? If we are told that the conqueror, or Mercury's son, or again Saint Michael of the Revelation, was given the spoils of the conquered angel, namely, his planet, why should opprobrium be any longer attached to a constellation so purified? Lucy. For is now the angel of the face of the Lord, 7 because that face is mirrored in it. We think rather, because the sun is reflecting his beams in Mercury 7 times more than it does on our earth, and twice more in Lucifer Venus, the Christian symbol proving again its astronomical origin. But whether from the astronomical, mystical, or symbological aspect, Lucifer is as good as any other planet. To advance as a proof of its demoniacal character, and identity with Satan, the configuration of Venus, which gives to the crescent of this planet the appearance of a cut-off horn, is rank nonsense. But to connect this with the horns of the mystic dragon in Revelation, one of which was broken 8, as the two French demonologists, the Marquis de Merville and the Chevalier de Musso, the champions of the Church militant, would have their readers believe in the second half of our present century is simply an insult to the public. Besides which, the devil had no horns before the 4th century of the Christian era. It is a purely patristic invention arising from their desire to connect the god Pan, and the pagan fauns and satyrs, with their satanic legend. The demons of heathendom were as hornless and as tailless as the archangel Michael himself in the imaginations of his worshippers. The horns were, in pagan symbolism, an emblem of divine power and creation, and of fertility in nature. Hence the ram's horns of Ammon, of Bacchus, and of Moses on ancient metals, and the cow's horns of Isis and Diana, etc., etc., and of the Lord God of the prophets of Israel himself. For Habakkuk gives the evidence that the symbolism was accepted by the chosen people as much as by the Gentiles. In chapter 3 that prophet speaks of the Holy One from Mount Paran, of the Lord God who comes from Taman, and whose brightness was as the light, and who had horns coming out of his hand. When one reads, moreover, the Hebrew text of Isaiah, and finds that no Lucifer is mentioned at all in chapter 14, v. 12, but simply Hillel, a bright star, one can hardly refrain 7 both in biblical and pagan theologies, says de Merville, the sun has its god, its defender, and its sacrilegious usurper, in other words, its Ormuzd, its planet Mercury, Mitra, and its Lucifer, Venus, or Ahriman, taken away from its ancient master, and now given to its conqueror. p. 164, therefore, Lucifer Venus is quite holy now. 8 In Revelation there is no horn broken, but it is simply said in chapter 13, 3, that John saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. John knew not in his generation of a horned devil. From wondering that educated people should be still ignorant enough at the close of our century to associate a radiant planet or anything else in nature for the matter of that with the devil. 9h. Pb 9 The literal words used, and their translation, are, Ik nap helta mi shamayim hillel ben shacher negdaim to la eretz kol esh el gum, or, how art thou fallen from the heavens, Hillel, son of the morning, how art thou cast down unto the earth, thou who didst cast down the nations. Here the word, translated Lucifer, is Hillel. And its meaning is shining brightly or gloriously. It is very true also, that by a pun to which Hebrew words lend themselves so easily, the verb Hillel may be made to mean to howl, hence, by an easy derivation, Hillel may be constructed into howler, or a devil, a creature. However, one hears rarely, if ever, howling. In his lexicon, Parkhurst says, the Syriac translation of this passage renders it howl, and even Jerome observes that it literally means to howl. Michaelis translates it, howl, son of the morning. But at this rate, Hillel, the great Jewish sage and reformer, might also be called a howler, and connected with the devil. Lucifer, July 1888. Starangel worship in the Roman Catholic Church. The subject matter of the present article has not been chosen from any desire of finding fault with the Christian religion, as Lucifer is often accused of doing. No special animosity is felt towards popery any more than against any other existing dogmatic and ritualistic faith. We merely hold that there is no higher religion than truth. Hence, being incessantly attacked by the Christians, among whom none are so bitter and contemptuous as the Romanists, who call us idolaters and heathens, and otherwise denounce us, it is necessary that at times something should be said in our defense, and truth re-established. The Theosophists are accused of believing in astrology, and the Devas, Dhyan Kohans, of the Hindus and northern Buddhists. A too impulsive missionary in the central provinces of India has actually called us astrolators, Sabians and I/Aviv worshippers. This, as usual, is an unfounded calumny and a misrepresentation. No Theosophist, no occultist in the true sense of the word has ever worshipped devas, nats, angels, or even planetary spirits. Recognition of the actual existence of such beings which, however exalted, are still gradually evolved creatures and finite, and even reverence for some of them is not worship. The latter is an elastic word, one that has been made threadbare by the poverty of the English tongue. We address a magistrate as his worship, but it can hardly be said that we pay to him divine honors. A mother often worships her children, a husband his wife, and vice versa, but none of these prays to the object of his worship. But in neither case does it apply to the occultists. An occultist's reverence for certain high spirits may be very great in some cases, perhaps even as great as the reverence felt by some Christians for their archangels Michael and Gabriel and their, St. George of Cappadocia, the learned purveyor of Constantine's armies. But it stops there. For the Theosophists, these planetary angels occupy no higher place than that which Virgil assigns them. They boast ethereal vigor and are formed from seeds of heavenly birth, as does also every mortal. Each and all are occult potencies having sway over certain attributes of nature. And, if once attracted to a mortal, they do help him in certain things. Yet, on the whole, the less one has to do with them the better. Not so with the Roman Catholics, our pious detractors. The Papists worship them and have rendered to them divine homage from the beginning of Christianity to this day, and in the full acceptation of the italicized words, as this article will prove. Even for the Protestants, the angels in general, if not the 7 angels of the stars particularly, are harbingers of the Most High and ministering spirits to whose protection they appeal, and who have their distinct place in the Book of Common Prayer. The fact that the star and planetary angels are worshipped by the Papists is not generally known. The cult had many vicissitudes. It was several times abolished, then again permitted. It is the short history of its growth, its last re-establishment and the recurrent efforts to proclaim this worship openly, of which a brief sketch is here attempted. This worship may be regarded for the last few years as obsolete, yet to this day it was never abolished. Therefore it will now be my pleasure to prove that if anyone deserves the name of idolatrous, it is not the Theosophists, occultists, Kabbalists, and astrologers, but, indeed, most of the Christians, those Roman Catholics, who, besides the star angels, worship a kyrielle of more or less problematical saints and the Virgin Mary, of whom their church has made a regular goddess. The short bits of history that follow are extracted from various trustworthy sources, such as the Roman Catholics will find it rather difficult to gainsay or repudiate. For our authorities are, a. various documents in the archives of the Vatican, b. sundry works by pious and well-known Roman Catholic writers, ultramontanes to the backbone lay and ecclesiastical authors, and finally, c. a papal bull, than which no better evidence could be found. In the middle of the VLLTH century of the Christian era, the very notorious Archbishop Adalbert of Magdeburg, famous as few in the annals of magic, appeared before his judges. He was charged with, and ultimately convicted by the Second Council of Rome presided over by Pope Zachariah, of using during his performances of ceremonial magic the names of the 7 spirits then at the height of their power in the Church. Among others, that of Uriel, with the help of whom he had succeeded in producing his greatest phenomena. As can be easily shown, the Church is not against magic proper, but only against those magicians who fail to conform to her methods and rules of evocation. However, as the wonders wrought by the Right Reverend sorcerer were not of a character that would permit of their classification among miracles by the grace, and to the glory of God, they were declared unholy. Moreover, the Archangel Uriel, Lux et Ignis, having been compromised by such exhibitions, his name had to be discredited. But, as such a disgrace upon one of the thrones and messengers of the Most High would have reduced the number of these Jewish septuaries to only 6, and thus have thrown into confusion the whole celestial hierarchy, a very clever and crafty subterfuge was resorted to. It was, however, neither new, nor has it proved very convincing or efficacious. It was declared that Bishop Adalbert's Uriel, the fire of God, was not the archangel mentioned in the 2nd book of Esdras, nor was he the glorious personage so often named in the magical books of Moses, especially in the 6th and 7th. The sphere or planet of this original Uriel was said, by Michael Glycas the Byzantine, to be the Sunday. How then could this exalted being, the friend and companion of Adam in Eden before his fall, and, later, the chum of Seth and Enoch, as all pious Christians know. How could he ever have given a helping hand to sorcery? Never, never. The idea alone was absurd. Therefore, the Uriel so revered by the fathers of the Church, remained as unassailable and as immaculate as ever. It was a devil of the same name, an obscure devil, one must think, since he is nowhere mentioned who had to pay the penalty of Bishop Adalbert's little transactions in black magic. This had Uriel is, as a certain tonsured advocate has tried hard to insinuate, connected with a certain significant word of occult nature, used by and known only to Masons of a very high degree. Ignorant of the word itself, however, the defender has most gloriously failed to prove his version. Such whitewashing of the archangel's character was of course necessary in view of the special worship paid to him. Saint Ambrosius had chosen Uriel as a patron and paid him almost divine reverence. One again, the famous Father Gastaldi, the Dominican monk, writer, and inquisitor, had proven in his curious work on the angels, De Angelis, that the worship of the seven spirits by the Church had been and was legal in all the ages, and that it was necessary for the moral support and faith of the children of the Roman Church. In short, that he who should neglect these gods was as bad as any heathen who did not. Though sentenced and suspended, Bishop Adalbert had a formidable party in Germany, one that not only defended and won de fide ad gratiam, Book High, supported the sorcerer himself, but also the disgraced archangel. Hence, the name of Uriel was left in the missals after the trial, the throne merely remaining under suspicion. In accordance with her admirable policy, the Church having declared that the blessed Uriel had not to do with the accursed Uriel of the Kabbalists, the matter rested there. To show the great latitude offered to such subterfuges, the occult tenets about the celestial hosts have only to be remembered. The world of being begins with the spiritual fire, or sun, and its seven flames or rays. These sons of light, called the multiple because, allegorically speaking, they belong to, and lead a simultaneous existence in heaven and on earth, easily furnished a handle to the Church to hang her dual Uriel upon. Moreover, Devas, Hyankohans, gods and archangels are all identical and are made to change their protean forms, names and positions, ad libitum. As the sidereal gods of the Sabians became the Kabbalistic and Talmudistic angels of the Jews with their esoteric names unaltered, so they passed bag and baggage into the Christian Church as the archangels, exalted only in their office. These names are their mystery titles. So mysterious are they, indeed, that the Roman Catholics themselves are not sure of them, now that the Church, in her anxiety to hide their humble origin, has changed and altered them about a dozen times. This is what the pious de Merville confesses, to speak with precision and certainty, as we might like to, about everything in connection with the angels, names and attributes is not an easy task. For when one has said that these spirits are the seven assistants that surround the throne of the Lamb and form its seven horns, that the famous seven-branched candlestick of the temple was their type and symbol. When we have shown them figured in Revelation by the seven stars in the Saviour's hand, or by the angels letting loose the seven plagues, we shall but have stated once more one of those incomplete truths which we have to handle with such caution. The spirits before their fall. Here the author utters a great truth. He would have uttered one still greater, though, had he added that no truth, upon any subject whatever, has been ever made complete by the Church. Otherwise, where would be the mystery so absolutely necessary to the authority of the ever incomprehensible dogmas of the Holy Bride? These spirits are called primariae principes. But what these first principles are in reality is not explained. In the first centuries of Christianity the Church would not do so, and in this one she knows of them no more than her faithful lay sons do. She has lost the secret. The question concerning the definite adoption of names for these angels, de Merville tells us, has given rise to controversies that have lasted for centuries. To this day these seven names are a mystery. Yet they are found in certain missals and in the secret documents at the Vatican, along with the astrological names known to many. But as the Kabbalists, and among others Bishop Adalbert have used some of them. The Church will not accept these titles, though she worships the creatures. The usual names accepted are Michael, the keys ut Deus, the like unto God; Gabriel, the strength, or power, of God; Raphael, or divine virtue; Uriel, God's light and fire; Scaltiel, the speech of God; Jehudiel, the praise of God; and Barachiel, the blessing of God. These 7 are absolutely canonical, but they are not the true mystery names, the magical potencies. And even among the substitutes, as just shown, Uriel has been greatly compromised, and the 3 last enumerated are pronounced suspicious. Nevertheless, though nameless, they are still worshipped. Nor is it true to say that no trace of these 3 names so suspicious is anywhere found in the Bible, for they are mentioned in a certain of the old Hebrew scrolls. One of them is named in chapter 16 of Genesis, the angel who appears to Hagar, and all the 3 appear as the Lord, the Elohim, to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, as the 3 men who announced to Sarai the birth of Isaac, Genesis 18. Jehudiel, moreover, is distinctly named in chapter XXIII of Exodus, as the angel in whom was the name, praise in the original, of God, vide verse 21. It is through their divine attributes, which have led to the formation of the names, that these archangels may be identified by an easy esoteric method of transmutation with the Chaldean great gods, and even with the 7 Manas and the 7 Rishis of India. 2. They are the 7 Sabian gods, and the 7 seats, thrones, and 2. He who knows anything of the Puranas and their allegories, knows that the Rishis therein as well as the Manas are sons of God, of Brahma, and themselves gods, that they become men, and then, as Saptarishi, they turn into stars and constellations. Finally that they are first 7, then 10, then 14, and finally 21. The occult meaning is evident. Virtues of the Kabbalists, and now they have become with the Catholics, their 7 eyes of the Lord, and the 7 thrones, instead of seats. Both Kabbalists and heathen must feel quite flattered to thus see their devas and rishis become the ministers plenipotentiary of the Christian God. And now the narrative may be continued unbroken. Until about the XVth century after the misadventure of Bishop Adalbert, the names of only the first 3 archangels out of the 7 stood in the Church in their full odor of sanctity. The other 4 remained ostracized as names. Whoever has been in Rome must have visited the privileged temple of the 7 spirits, especially built for them by Michelangelo, the famous church known as St. Mary of the Angels. Its history is curious but very little known to the public that frequents it. It is worthy, however, of being recorded. In 1460, there appeared in Rome a great saint, named Amadseus. He was a nobleman from Lusitania, who already in Portugal had become famous for his prophecies and beatific visions. 8. During one of such he had a revelation. The 7 archangels appeared to the holy man, so beloved by the Pope that Sixtus IV had actually permitted him to build on the site of St. Peter in Monte Oreo, a Franciscan monastery. And having appeared they revealed to him their genuine bona fide mystery names. The names used by the Church were substitutes, they said. So they were, and the angels spoke truthfully. Their business with Amadseus was a modest request. They demanded to be legally recognized under their legitimate patronymics, to receive public worship and have a temple of their own. Now the Church in her great wisdom had declined these names from the first, as being those of Chaldean gods, and had substituted for them astrological aliases. This then, could not be done, as they were names of demons, explains Baronius. But so were the substitutes in Chaldea before they were altered for a purpose in the Hebrew angelology. And if they are names of demons, asks pertinently de Merville, why are they yet given to Christians and Roman Catholics at baptism? The truth is that if the last 4 enumerated are demon names, so must be those of Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. But the holy visitors were a match for the Church in obstinacy. At the same hour that Amadseus had his vision at Rome, in Sicily, at Palermo, another wonder was taking place. A miraculously painted picture of the seven spirits, was as miraculously exhumed from under the ruins of an old chapel. On the painting the same seven mystery names that were being revealed at that hour to amateurs were also found inscribed under the portrait of each angel, one says the chronicler. Whatever might be in this our age of unbelief the feelings of the great and learned leaders of various psychic and telepathic societies on this subject. Pope Sixtus IV was greatly impressed by the coincidence. He believed in amateurs as implicitly as Mr. Brudenell believed in the Abyssinian prophet, Herr Paulus. 8. But this was by no means the only coincidence of the day. The Holy Roman and Apostolic Church was built on such miracles, and continues to stand on them now as on the rock of truth, for God has ever sent to her timely miracles. 6. Therefore, when also, for des esprits and cpar de merveille. 5. Herr Paulus, the no less miraculous production of Mr. Walter Besant's rather muddled and very one-sided fancy. 6. En passant a remark may be made and a query propounded. The miracles performed in the bosom of Mother Church from the apostolic down to the ecclesiastical miracles at Lourdes, if not more remarkable than those attributed to Herr Paulus, are at any rate far more wide-reaching, hence, more pernicious in their result upon the human mind. Either both kinds are possible, or both are due to fraud and dangerous hypnotic and magnetic powers possessed by some men. Now Mr. W. Besant evidently tries to impress upon his readers that his novel was written in the interests of that portion of society which is so easily befooled by the other. And if so, why then not have traced all such phenomena to their original and primeval source, i.e., belief in the possibility of supernatural occurrences because of the inculcated belief in the miracles in the Bible, and their continuation by the Church? No Abyssinian prophet, as no occult philosopher, has ever made such large claims to miracle and divine help, and no Peter's pence expected, either as the bride of Christ she, of Rome. Why has not then our author, since he was so extremely anxious to save the millions of England from delusion, and so very eager to expose the pernicious means used, why has he not tried to first explode the greater humbug, before he ever touched the minor tricks if any? Let him first explain to the British public the turning of water into wine and the resurrection of Lazarus on the half-hypnotic and half-jugglery and fraud hypothesis. For, if one set of wonders may be explained by blind belief and mesmerism, why not the other? Or is it because the Bible miracles believed in by every Protestant and Catholic, with the divine miracles at Lourdes thrown into the bargain by the latter, cannot be as easily handled by an author who desires to remain popular as those of the occult philosopher and the spiritual medium? Indeed, no courage, no fearless defiance of the consequences are required to denounce the helpless and now very much scared professional medium. But all these qualifications and an ardent love of truth into the bargain, are absolutely necessary if one would beard Mrs. Grundy in her den. For this the traducers of the esoteric Buddhists are too prudent and wily. They only seek cheap popularity with the scoffer and the materialist. Well, sure they are, that no professional medium will ever dare call them wholesale slanderers to their faces, or seek redress from them so long as the law against palmistry is staring him in the face. As to the esoteric Buddhist or occult philosopher, there is still less danger from this quarter. The con. On that very same day, an old prophecy written in very archaic Latin, and referring to both the find and the revelation, was discovered at Pisa. It produced quite a commotion among the faithful. The prophecy foretold, you see, the revival of the planetary angel worship for that period. Also that during the reign of Pope Clement VII, the convent of St. François de Paul would be raised on the emplacement of the little ruined chapel. The event occurred as predicted, boasts de Merville, forgetting that the Church had made the prediction true herself, by following the command implied in it. Yet this is called a prophecy to this day. But it was only in the XVth century that the Church consented at last to comply on every point with the request of her high-born celestial petitioners. At that time, though, there was hardly a church or chapel in Italy without a copy of the miraculous picture in painting or mosaic, and that actually, in 1516, a splendid temple to the seven spirits had been raised and finished near the ruined chapel at Palermo. Still the angels failed to be satisfied. In the words of their chronicler, the blessed spirits were not contented with Sicily alone, and secret prayers. They wanted a worldwide worship and the whole Catholic world to recognize them publicly. Heavenly denizens themselves, as it seems, are not quite free from the ambition and the vanities of our material plane. This is what the ambitious rectors devised to obtain that which they wanted. Antonio Duca, another seer, in the annals of the Church of Rome, had been just appointed rector of the Palermo Temple of the Seven Spirits. About that period, he began to have the same beatific visions as Amadsirs had. The archangels were now urging the popes through him to recognize them, and to establish a regular and a universal worship in their own names, just as it was before Bishop Adalbert's scandal. They insisted upon having a special temple built for them alone, and they wanted it upon the ancient site of the famous thermos of Diocletian. To the erection of these thermos, agreeably with tradition, 40,000 Christians tempt of the latter, for all the would-be traducers is absolute, and it requires more than the clumsy denunciations of a novelist to disturb them. And why should they feel annoyed? As they are neither professional prophets nor do they benefit by St. Peter's pence, the most malicious calumny can only make them laugh. Mr. Walter Besant, however, has said a great truth in his novel, a true pearl of foresight, dropped on a heap of mire: the occult philosopher does not propose to hide his light under a bushel. And 10,000 martyrs had been condemned, and helped in this task by such famous saints as Mariolus and Thraso. Since then, however, as stated in Bull LV by the Pope Pius IV, this den had remained set apart for the most profane usages and demon, magic, rites. But as it appears from sundry documents, all did not go quite as smooth as the blessed spirits would have liked, and the poor Duca had a hard time of it, notwithstanding the strong protection of the Colonna families, who used all their influence with Pope Paul III, and the personal request of Marguerite of Austria, the daughter of Charles VTH. The seven spirits could not be satisfied. For the same mysterious, and to us very clear, reasons, though propitiated and otherwise honored in every way, the difficult mission of Duca, in fact, was crowned with success only 34 years later. 10 years before, however, namely in 1551, the preparatory purification of the thermos had been ordered by Pope Julius III, and a first church had been built under the name of St. Mary of the Angels. But the Blessed Thrones, feeling displeased with its name, brought on a war during which this temple was plundered and destroyed, as if instead of glorified archangels they had been maleficent Kabbalistic spooks. After this, they went on appearing to seers and saints, with greater frequency than before, and clamored even more loudly for a special place of worship. They demanded the re-erection on the same spot, the thermes, of a temple which should be called the Church of the Seven Angels. But there was the same difficulty as before. The popes had pronounced the original titles demon names, i.e., those of pagan gods, and to introduce them into the church service would have been fatal. The mystery names of the seven angels could not be given. True enough, when the old miraculous picture with the seven names on it had been found, these names had been freely used in the church services. But, at the period of the Renaissance, Pope Clement XI had ordered a special report to be made on them as they stood on the picture. It was a famous astronomer of that day, a Jesuit, named Joseph Bianchini, who was entrusted with this delicate mission. The result to which the inquest led, was as unexpected as it was fatal to the worshippers of the seven Sabian gods. The Pope, while commanding that the picture should be preserved, ordered the seven angelic names to be carefully rubbed out, and though these names are traditional, and although they have naught to do with, and are very different from the names used by Adalbert, the bishop magician of Magdeburg, as the chronicler cunningly adds, yet even their mention was forbidden in the holy churches of Rome. Thus affairs went on from 1527 till 1561, the rector trying to satisfy the orders of his seven guides, the Church fearing to adopt even the Chaldean substitutes for the mystery names as they had been so desecrated by magical practices. We are not told, however, why the mystery names, far less known than their substitutes have ever been, should not have been given out if the blessed thrones enjoyed the smallest confidence. But, it must have been small indeed, since one finds the 7 archangels demanding their restitution for 34 years, and refusing positively to be called by any other name, and the Church still deaf to their desires. The occultists do not conceal the reason why they have ceased to use them, they are dangerously magical. But why should the Church fear them? Have not the apostles, and Peter preeminently, been told whatsoever ye bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and were they not given power over every demon known and unknown? Nevertheless, some of the mystery names may be still found along with their substitutes in old Roman missals printed in 1563. There is one in the Barberini library with the whole Mass service in it, and the forbidden truly Sabian names of the 7 great gods flashing out ominously hither and thither. The gods lost patience once more. Acting in a truly Jehovistic spirit with their stiff-necked worshippers, they sent a plague. A terrible epidemic of obsession and possession broke out in 1553, when almost all Rome found itself possessed by the devil, says de Merville, without explaining whether the clergy were included. Then only Duca's wish was realized. His 7 inspirers were invoked in their own names, and the epidemic ceased as by enchantment. The blessed ones, adds the chronicler, proving by the divine powers they possessed, once more, that they had nothing in common with the demons of the same name, i.e. the Chaldean gods. 7. Then Michelangelo was summoned in all haste by Paul IV to the Vatican. His magnificent plan was accepted and the building of the former church begun. Its construction lasted over 3 years. In the archives of this now celebrated edifice, one can 7 but they had proved their power earlier by sending the war, the destruction of the church, and finally the epidemic, and this does not look very angelic to an occultist. Read that, the narrative of the miracles that occurred during that period could not be undertaken, as it was one incessant miracle of 3 years' duration. In the presence of all his cardinals, Pope Paul IV ordered that the 7 names, as originally written on the picture, should be restored, and inscribed around a large copy from it that surmounts to this day the high altar. The admirable temple was consecrated to the 7 angels in 1561. The object of the spirits was reached. 3 years later, nearly simultaneously, Michelangelo and Antonio Duca both died. They were no longer wanted. Duca was the first person buried in the church for the erection of which he had fought the best part of his life and finally procured for his heavenly patrons on his tomb the summary of the revelations obtained by him, as also the catalogue of the prayers and invocations, of the penances and fasts used as means of getting the blessed revelations, and more frequent visits from the 7 are engraved. In the vestria side of the documents attesting to, and enumerating some of the phenomena of the incessant miracle of 3 years' duration may be obtained for a small fee. The record of the miracles bears the imprimatur of a pope and several cardinals, but it still lacks that of the Society for Psychic Research. The 7 angels must be needing the latter badly, as without it their triumph will never be complete. Let us hope that the learned spookical researchers will send their smart boy to Rome at an early day, and that the blessed ones may find at Cambridge a Duca. But what became of the mystery names so cautiously used, and what of the new ones? First of all came the substitution of the name of Udil for one of the Kabbalistic names. Just 100 years later, all the 7 names suddenly disappeared, by order of the Cardinal Albitius. In the old and venerable church of Santa Maria della Pieta on the Piazza Colonna, the miraculous painting of the 7 archangels may be still seen, but the names have been scratched out and the places repainted. Sic transit gloria. A little while after that the Mass and Vesper services of the 7 were once more eliminated from the missals used, notwithstanding that they are quite distinct from those of the planetary spirits whe used to help Bishop Adalbert. but as the robe does not really make the monk, so the change of names cannot prevent the individuals that had them from being the same as they were before. They are still worshipped, and this is all that my article aims to prove. Will this be denied? In that case I have to remind the readers that so late as in 1825, a Spanish grandee supported by the Archbishop of Palermo made an attempt before Leo XII for the simultaneous re-establishment of the service and names. The Pope granted the church service but refused the permission to use the old names. 8. This service, perfected and amplified by order of Paul IV, the minutes of which exist to this day at the Vatican and the Minerva, remained in force during the whole pontificate of Leo X. The Jesuits were those who rejoiced the most at the resurrection of the old worship, in view of the prodigious help they received from it, as it ensured the success of their proselytizing efforts in the Philippine Islands. Pope Pius V conceded the same divine service to Spain, saying in his bull, that one could never exalt too much these 7 rectors of the world, figured by the 7 planets, and that it looked consoling and augured well for this century, that by the grace of God, the cult of these 7 ardent lights, and these 7 stars, was regaining all its luster in the Christian Republic. 9. The same Holy Pope permitted moreover to the nuns of Matricensis to establish the fate of Jehudile, the patron of their convent. Whether another less pagan name has now been substituted for it we are not informed, nor does it in the least matter. In 1832 the same demand in a petition to spread the worship of the 7 spirits of God, was reiterated, endorsed this time by 87 bishops and thousands of officials with high-sounding names in the Church of Rome. Again, in 1858, Cardinal Patrizzi and King Ferdinand II in the name of all the people of Italy reiterated their petition, and again, finally, in 1862. Thus, the church services in honor of the 7 spirit stars have never been abrogated since 1825. To this day they are in full vigor in Palermo, in Spain, and even in Rome at St. Mary of the Angels and the Gesù, though entirely suppressed everywhere else, all this because of Adalbert's heresy. De Merville and the other supporters of star angel worship are pleased to say. In reality there is no reason but the one already disclosed for it. 8. This is quoted from the volumes of the Marquis de Merville's Pneumatologie des Esprits Vol. 2, p. 388. A more rabid papist and ultramontane having never existed, his testimony can hardly be suspected. He seems to glory in this idolatry and is loud in demanding its public and universal restoration. 9 p. 358 Ibid vidi infra. Even the 7 substitutes, especially the last 4, have been too openly connected with black magic and astrology. Writers of the de Merville type are in despair. Not daring to blame the Church, they vent their wrath upon the old alchemists and Rosicrucians. They clamor for the restitution of a public worship notwithstanding, and the imposing association formed since 1862 in Italy, Bavaria, Spain, and elsewhere for the re-establishment of the cult of the 7 spirits in all its fullness. And in all Catholic Europe, gives hope that in a few years more the 7 rishis of India now happily domiciled in the constellation of the Great Bear will become by the grace and will of some infallible pontiff of Rome the legal and honored divine patrons of Christendom. And why not, since, St. George is to this day, the patron saint of not only Holy Russia, Protestant Germany, Fairy Venice, but also of Merry England, whose soldiers, says W. M. Braithwaite, 10 would uphold his prestige with their heart's blood. And surely our 7 gods cannot be worse than was the rascally George of Cappadocia during his lifetime. Hence, with the courage of true believers, the Christian defenders of the 7 star angels deny nothing. At any rate they keep silent whenever accused of rendering divine honors to Chaldean and other gods. They even admit the identity and proudly confess to the charge of star worshipping. The accusation has been thrown many a time by the French academicians into the teeth of their late leader, the Marquis de Merville, and this is what he writes in reply: we are accused of mistaking stars for angels. The charge is acquiring such a wide notoriety that we are forced to answer it very seriously. It is impossible that we should try to dissimulate it without failing in frankness and courage, since this pretended mistake is repeated incessantly in the scriptures as in our theology. We shall examine this opinion hitherto so accredited, today discredited, and which attributes rightly to our 7 principal spirits the rulership, not of the 7 known planets, with which we are reproached, but of the 7 principal planets 11, which is quite a different thing. 1310 St. George for Merry England, by W. M. Braithwaite. Masonic Monthly, No. 2. 11. These principal planets are the mystery planets of the pagan initiates, but travestied by dogma and priestcraft. 12. Pneumatologie des Esprits, Volume 2. Memoiradres Auxiliary Academies, p. 359. And the author hastens to cite the authority of Bobinnet, the astronomer, who sought to prove in an able article of the Revue des Deux Mondes, May, 1885, that in reality besides the Earth we had only 7 big planets. The 7 principal planets is another confession to the acceptance of a purely occult tenet. Every planet according to the esoteric doctrine is in its composition a septenary like man, in its principles. That is to say, the visible planet is the physical body of the sidereal being, the Atma or spirit of which is the angel, or Rishi, or Dhyan Kohan, or Deva, or whatever we call it. This belief, as the occultists will see, read in esoteric Buddhism about the constitution of the planets, is thoroughly occult. It is a tenet of the secret doctrine minus its idolatrous element, pure and simple. As taught in the Church and her rituals, however, and especially, as practiced, it is astrology as pure and as simple. There is no need to show here the difference between teaching, or theory, and practice in the Holy Roman Catholic Church. The words Jesuit and Jesuitism cover the whole ground. The spirit of truth has departed ages ago, if it has ever been near it, from the Church of Rome. At this, the Protestant Church, so full of brotherly spirit and love for her sister Church, will say, Amen. The dissenter, whose heart is as full of the love of Jesus as of hatred towards ritualism and its mother popery, will chuckle. In the editorial of the Times for November 7, 1866, stands a terrible indictment against the Protestants, which says, under the influence of the episcopal bench, all the studies connected with theology have withered, until English biblical critics are the scorn of foreign scholars. Whenever we take up the work of a theologian who is likely to be a dean or a bishop, we find, not an earnest inquirer setting forth the results of honest research, but merely an advocate, who, we can perceive, has begun his work with the fixed determination of proving black-white in favor of his own traditional system. If the Protestants do not recognize the 7 angels, nor, while refusing them divine worship, do they feel ashamed and afraid of their names, as the Roman Catholics do, on the other hand they are guilty of Jesuitism of another kind, just as bad. For, while professing to believe the Scriptures a direct revelation from God, not one sentence of which should be altered under the penalty of eternal damnation, they yet tremble and cower before the discoveries of science, and try to pander to their great enemy. Geology, anthropology, ethnology, and astronomy are to them what Uriel, Skaltiel, Jehudiel, and Barachiel are to the Roman Catholic Church. It is 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and since neither one nor the other of the 2 religions will abstain from anathematizing, slandering, and persecuting magic, occultism, and even theosophy, it is but just and proper that in their turn the students of the sacred science of old should retort at last, and keep on telling the truth fearlessly to the faces of both. Magna est veritas et pravali bithhpb. Stars and numbers. Ancient civilization saw nothing absurd in the claims of astrology, no more than many an educated and thoroughly scientific man sees in it today. Judicial astrology, by which the fate and acts of men and nations might be foreknown, hardly appeared, nor does it even now appear, any more unphilosophical or unscientific than does natural astrology or astronomy, by which the events of so-called brute inanimate nature, changes of weather, and sea, might be predicted, for it was not even Vedic insight that was claimed by the votaries of that abstruse and really grand science, but simply a great proficiency in that method of procedure which allows the astrologer to foresee certain events in the life of a man by the position of the planets at the time of his birth. Once the probability, or even the simple possibility, of an occult influence exercised by the stars upon the destiny of man admitted, and why should the fact appear more improbable in the case of stars and man than in that of the sunspots and potatoes? And astrology becomes no less an exact science than astronomy. The Earth, Professor Balfour Stewart, FRS, tells us is very seriously affected by what takes place in the Sun. A connection is strongly suspected between epidemics and the appearance of the Sun's surface. One, and if, as that man of science tells us, a connection of some mysterious kind between the Sun and the Earth is more than suspected. And the problem is a most important one to solve. How much more important the solution of that other mystery, the undoubted affinity between man and the stars, an affinity believed in for countless ages and by the most learned among men. Surely the destiny of man deserves as much consideration as that of a turnip or a potato. And if a disease of the latter one of the best known vegetable epidemics is that of the potato disease. The years 1846, 1860, and 1872 were bad years for the potato disease, and those years are not very far from the years of maximum sunspots. There is a curious connection between these diseases affecting plants and the state of the Sunday. A disease that took place about 3 centuries since, of a periodical and very violent character, called the sweating sickness, took place about the end of the 15th and the beginning of the 16th century, and this is exactly the sunspot period. The Sun and the Earth, lecture by Professor Balfour Stewart, may be scientifically foretold whenever that vegetable crops out during a sunspot period. Why should not a life of disease, or health, of natural or violent death be as scientifically prognosticated by the position and appearance of the constellation with which man is as directly connected and which bears the same relation to him as the Sun bears to the Earth? In its days, astrology was greatly honored, for when in able hands it was often shown to be as precise and trustworthy in its predictions as astronomical predictions are in our own age. Omens were studied by all imperial Rome, as much, if not more than they are now in India. Tiberius practiced the science, and the Saracens in Spain held star divination in the greatest reverence, astrology passing into Western Europe through these, our first civilizers. Alfonso, the wise king of Castile and Leon, made himself famous in the 13th century by his astrological tables, called Alphonsine, and his code of the Pseudepietitis, and the great astronomer Kepler in the 17th, the discoverer of the 3 great laws of planetary motions, known as Kepler's laws, believed in and proclaimed astrology a true science. Kepler, the Emperor Rudolph's mathematician, he to whom Newton is indebted for all his subsequent discoveries, is the author of the Principles of Astrology, in which he proves the power of certain harmonious configurations of suitable planets to control human impulses. In his official capacity of imperial astronomer, he is historically known to have predicted to Wallenstein, from the position of the stars, the issue of the war in which that unfortunate general was then engaged. No less than himself, his friend, protector and instructor, the great astronomer Tycho de Brahe, believed in, and expanded, the astrological system. He was forced, moreover, to admit the influence of the constellations on terrestrial life and actions quite against his will or wish, and merely because of the constant verification of facts. Closely related to astrology is the Kabbala and its system of numerals. The secret wisdom of the ancient Chaldees left by them as an inheritance to the Jews relates primarily to the mythological science of the heavens and contains the doctrines of the hidden or occult wisdom concerning the cycles of time. In the ancient philosophy, the sacredness of numbers began with the great first, the one, and ended with the naught or zero, the symbol of the infinite and boundless circle, which represents the universe. All the intervening figures, in whatever combination, or however multiplied, represent philosophical ideas relating either to a moral or a physical fact in nature. They are the key to the Archean views on cosmogony, in its broad sense, including man and beings, and relate to the human race and individuals spiritually as well as physically. The numerals of Pythagoras, says Porphyry, were hieroglyphical symbols, by means whereof he explained all ideas concerning the nature of all things, Davida Pythag. In the symbolical Kabbalah, the most ancient system left to us by the Chaldeans, the modes of examining letters, words, and sentences for hidden meaning were numerical. The Gematria, one of the three modes, is purely arithmetical and mathematical, and consists in applying to the letters of a word the sense they bear as numbers, letters being used also for figures in the Hebrew as in Greek. Figurative Gematria deduces mysterious interpretations from the shapes of letters used in occult manuscripts and the Bible. Thus, as shown by Cornelius Agrippa, in Numbers, X. 35, the letter Beth means the reversal of enemies. The sacred anagrams known as Zerah yield their mysterious sense by the second mode named Thamura, and consists in displacing the letters and substituting them one for another and then arranging them in rows according to their numerical value. If, of all operations in the occult sciences, there is not one that is not rooted in astrology, arithmetic, and especially geometry are a part of the first principles of magic. The most recondite mysteries and powers in nature are made to yield to the power of numbers. And let this not be regarded as a fallacy. He who knows the relative and respective numbers, or the so-called correspondence between causes and effects, will alone be able to obtain of a certainty the desired result. A small mistake, a trifling difference in an astronomical calculation, and no correct prediction of a heavenly phenomenon becomes possible. As Severinus Boethius puts it, it is by the proportion of certain numbers that all things were formed. God geometrizes, saith Plato, meaning creative nature. If there are so many occult virtues in natural things, what marvel if in numbers which are pure and commixed only with ideas, there should be found virtues greater and more occult, asks Agrippa. Even time must contain the mystery number, so also does motion, or action, and so, therefore, must all things that move, act, or are subjected to time. But the mystery is in the abstract power of number, in its rational and formal state, not in the expression of it by the voice, as among people who buy and sell. De Occulta Philosophy Cap 3 PCII, the Pythagoreans claimed to discern many things in the numbers of names, and if those who having understanding were invited to compute the number and name of the beast by the author of St. John's Revelation, it is because that author was a Kabbalist. The wiseacres of our generations raise daily the cry that science and metaphysics are irreconcilable, and facts prove as daily that it is but one more fallacy among the many that are uttered. The reign of exact science is proclaimed on every housetop, and Plato, who is said to have trusted to his imagination, is sneered at, while Aristotle's method built on pure reason is the one accepted by science. Why? Because the philosophical method of Plato was the inverse of that of Aristotle. Its starting point was universals, the very existence of which is a matter of faith, says Draper, and from these it descended to particulars, or details. Aristotle, on the contrary, rose from particulars to universals, advancing to them by inductions, conflict between religion and science. We humbly answer to this, that mathematics, the only exact and infallible science in the world of sciences, proceeds from universals. It is this year especially, the year 1881, which seems to defy and challenge sober, matter-of-fact science, and by its extraordinary events above, as below, in heaven as upon earth, to invite criticism upon its strange coincidences. Its freaks in the domains of meteorology and geology were prognosticated by the astronomers, and these every one is bound to respect. There is a certain triangle seen this year on the horizon, formed of the most brilliant stars, which was predicted by them, but none the less left unexplained. It is a simple geometrical combination of heavenly bodies, they say. As to that triangle, formed of the three large planets Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, having aught to do with the destinies of either men or nations, why, that is pure superstition. The mantle of the astrologers is burnt, and the predictions of some of them, whenever verified, must be attributed to simple and blind chance. We are not so sure of that, and, if permitted, will further on tell why. Meanwhile, we must remind the reader of the fact that Venus, the most intensely brilliant of the three above-named planets, as was remarked in Europe and for all we know in India, also suddenly parted company with its two companions and, slowly moving onward, stopped above them, whence it goes on dazzling the inhabitants of the earth with an almost preternatural brilliancy. The conjunction of two planets happens but rarely, that of three is still more rare, while the conjunction of 4 and 5 planets becomes an event. The latter phenomenon took place in historical times but once, 2449 years BC, when it was observed by the Chinese astronomers and has not recurred since then. That extraordinary meeting of 5 large planets forebode all kinds of evils to the celestial empire and its peoples, and the panic then created by the predictions of the Chinese astrologers was not in vain. During the following 500 years, a series of internal broils, revolutions, wars, and changes of dynasty marked the end of the golden age of national felicity in the empire founded by the great Fu Hai. Another conjunction is known to have happened just before the beginning of the Christian era. In that year, 3 large planets had approached so closely together as to be mistaken by many for one single star of an immense size. Biblical scholars were more than once inclined to identify these 3 in one with the Trinity, and at the same time with the star of the wise men of the East. But they saw themselves thwarted in such pious desires by their hereditary enemies, the irreverent men of science, who proved that the astronomical conjunction took place a year before the period claimed for the alleged birth of Jesus. Whether the phenomenon forebode good or evil is best answered by the subsequent history and development of Christianity, than which, no other religion cost so many human victims, shed such torrents of blood, nor brought the greater portion of humanity to suffer from what is now termed the blessings of Christianity and civilization. The third conjunction took place in 1563 AD. It appeared near the great nebula in the constellation of Cancer. There were 3 great planets, and according to the astronomers of those days the most nefarious, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The constellation of Cancer has always had a bad reputation. That year the mere fact of its having in its neighborhood a triune conjunction of evil stars, caused the astrologers to predict great and speedy disasters. These did come to pass. A terrible plague broke out and raged in all Europe, carrying off thousands upon thousands of victims. And now, in 1881, we have again a visit of 3 other wanderers. What do they forebode? Nothing good, and it would seem, as if of the great evils they are likely to pour on the devoted heads of hapless humanity, the fatal prelude is already being played. Let us enumerate and see how far we are from the truth. The nearly simultaneous and certainly in some cases unexpected deaths of great and the most remarkable men of our age. In the region of politics, we find the Emperor of Russia, Lord Beaconsfield, and Aga Khan, 3 in that of literature, Carlyle and George Eliot. In the world of art, Rubinstein, the greatest musical genius. In the domain of geology, earthquakes which have already destroyed the town of Casamasi Isla on the island of Ischia, a village in California, and the island of Chio which was laid entirely waste by the terrible catastrophe one, moreover, predicted for that very day by the astrologer Raphael. In the domain of wars, the hitherto invincible Great Britain was worsted at the Cape by a handful of Boers. Ireland is convulsed and threatens, a plague now rages in Mesopotamia, another war is preparing between Turkey and Greece, armies of socialists and red-handed nihilists obscure the sun of the political horizon in Europe, and the latter, thrown into a violent perturbation, is breathlessly awaiting the most unexpected events in the future, defying the perspicacity of the most acute of her political men. In the religious spheres the heavenly triangle pointed its double horn at the monastic congregations, and a general exodus of monks and nuns headed by the children of Loyola, followed. In France there is a revival of infidelity and mental rebellion, and with it a proportionate increase of missionary laborers, not labor, who like the hordes of Attila destroy much and build but little. Shall we add to the list of signs of these ukfasti dies, the birth of the new dispensation at Calcutta? The latter, though having but a small and quite a local importance, shows yet a direct bearing upon our subject, i.e., the astrological meaning of the planetary conjunction. Like Christianity with Jesus and his apostles, the new dispensation can Khan was one of the most remarkable men of the century. Of all the Mussulman, Shias, or Sunnis, who rejoice in the green turban, the Aga's claims to a direct descent from Muhammad through Ali rested on undeniable proofs. He again represented the historical assassins of the old man of the mountain. He had married a daughter of the late Shah of Persia, but political broils forced him to leave his native land and seek refuge with the British government in India. In Bombay he had a numerous religious following. He was a high-spirited, generous man and a hero. The most noticeable feature of his life was that he was born in 1800 and died in 1881, at the age of 81. In his case too, the occult influence of the year 1881 has asserted itself. Fourth, boast of having had a forerunner in starry heaven, the present triune conjunction of planets. It proves, moreover, our Kabbalistic theory of periodical cyclic recurrences of events. As the Roman skeptical world of 1881 years ago, we are startled by a fresh revival of mendicant Ebionites, fasting Essenes, and apostles upon whom descend cloven tongues like as of fire, and of whom we cannot even say as of the Jerusalem 12, that these men are full of new wine, since their inspiration is entirely due to water, we are told. The year 1881, then, of which we have lived but 1/3, promises, as predicted by astrologers and astronomers, a long and gloomy list of disasters on land, as on the seas. We have shown elsewhere, Bombay Gazette, March 30, 1881, how strange in every respect was the grouping of the figures of our present year, adding that another such combination will not happen in the Christian chronology before the year 11,811, just 9,930 years hence, when there will be no more a Christian chronology. We are afraid, but something else. We said, our year 1881, offers that strange fact, that from whichever of four sides you look at its figures, from right or left, from top or bottom, from the back, by holding the paper up to the light or even upside down, you will always have before you the same mysterious and Kabbalistic numbers of 1881. It is the correct number of the three figures which have most perplexed mystics for over 18 centuries. The year 1881, in short, is the number of the great beast of the Revelation, the number 666 of St. John's Apocalypse, that Kabbalistic book par excellence. See for yourselves, 1 plus 8 plus 8 plus 1 make 18, 18 divided thrice gives 3 times 6, or placed in a row, 666, the number of man. This number has been for centuries the puzzle of Christendom and was interpreted in 1,000 different ways. Newton himself worked for years over the problem, but, ignorant of the secret Kabbalah, failed. Before the Reformation it was generally supposed in the Church to have reference to the coming Antichrist. Since then the Protestants began to apply it in that spirit of Christian charity which so characterizes Calvinism to the Latin Popish Church, which they call the harlot, the great beast and the scarlet woman, and forthwith the latter returned the compliment in the same brotherly and friendly spirit. The supposition that it refers to the Roman nation, the Greek letters of the word Latinus as numerals, amounting to exactly 666, is absurd. There are beliefs and traditions among the people which spring no one knows from whence and pass from one generation to the other, as an oral prophecy, and an unavoidable fact to come. One of such traditions, a correspondent of the Moscow Gazette happened to hear in 1874 from the mountaineers of the Tyrolean Alps, and subsequently from old people in Bohemia. From the first day of 1876, says that tradition, a sad, heavy period will begin for the whole world and will last for 7 consecutive years. The most unfortunate and fatal year for all will be 1881. He who will survive it, has an iron head. An interesting new combination, meanwhile, of the year 1881, in reference to the life of the murdered Tsar, may be found in the following dates, every one of which marks a more or less important period in his life. It proves at all events what important and mysterious a part, the figures 1 and 8 played in his life. 1 and 8 make 18, and the emperor was born April 17, 1 plus 7 equals 8, in 1818. He died in 1881, the figures of the year of his birth and death being identical, and coinciding, moreover, with the date of his birth 17 equals 1 plus 7 equals 8. The figures of the years of the birth and death being thus the same, as 4 times 18 can be formed out of them, and the sum total of each year's numerals is 18. The arrival at Petersburg of the late Empress the Tsar's bride took place on September 8, their marriage April 16, 8 plus 8 equals 16, their eldest daughter, the Grand Duchess Alexandra, was born August 18, the late Tsarevich Nicholas Alexandrovich, on September 8, 1843, 1 plus 8 plus 4 plus 3 equals 16, i.e., twice 8. The present Tsar, Alexander III, was born February 26, 2 plus 6 equals 8, the proclamation of the ascension to the throne of the late emperor was signed February 18, the public proclamation about the coronation day took place April 17, 1 plus 7 equals 8. His entrance into Moscow for the coronation was on August 17, 1 plus 7 equals 8, the coronation itself being performed August 26, 2 plus 6 equals 8, the year of the liberation of the serfs, 1861, whose numerals sum up 16, i.e., twice 8. To conclude, we may mention here a far more curious discovery made in relation, and as a supplement, to the above calculation, by a Jewish rabbi in Russia, a Kabbalist, evidently, from the use he makes of the gematria reckoning. It was just published in a St. Petersburg paper. The Hebrew letters as stated have all their numerical value or correspondence in arithmetical figures. The number 18 in the Hebrew alphabet is represented by the letters Hate equals 8, and Jod equals 10. i.e., 18. United together Hate and Jod form the word Kai, or Hi, which literally translated means the imperative live and alive. Every Orthodox Jew during his fast and holy days is bound to donate for some pious purpose a sum of money consisting of, and containing the number 18 in it. So, for instance, he will give 18 kopecks, or 18 10-kopek bits, 18 rubles, or 18 times 18 kopecks or rubles according to his means and degree of religious fervor. Hence, the year 1818 that of the emperor's birth meant, if read in Hebrew Kai, or live pronounced emphatically twice, while the year 1881 that of his death read in the same way, yields the fatal words Kaids are rendered in English, thou living one depart, or in other words, life is ended. Of course, those skeptically inclined will remark that it is all due to blind chance and coincidence. Nor would we much insist upon the contrary, were such an observation to proceed but from uncompromising atheists, and materialists, who, denying the above, remain only logical in their disbelief, and have as much right to their opinion as we have to our own. But we cannot promise the same degree of indulgence whenever attacked by orthodox religionists. For, that class of persons while pooh-poohing speculative metaphysics, and even astrology, a system based upon strictly mathematical calculations, pertaining as much to exact science as biology or physiology, and open to experiment and verification, will, at the same time, firmly believe that potato disease, cholera, railway accidents, earthquakes, and the like are all of divine origin and, proceeding directly of God, have a meaning and a bearing on human life in its highest aspects. It is to the latter class of theists that we say, prove to us the existence of a personal God either outside or inside physical nature, demonstrate him to us as the external agent, the ruler of the universe, show him concerned in human affairs and destiny and exercising on them an influence, at least, as great, and reasonably probable as that exercised by the sunspots upon the destiny of vegetables and then laugh at us. Until then, and so long as no one is prepared with such a proof and solution, in the words of Tyndall, let us lower our heads, and acknowledge our ignorance, priest and philosopher, one and all. Theosophical Literature ISIS Unveiled, A Master Key to the Mysteries of Ancient and Modern Science and Theology by H. P. Blavatsky Vol. I Science, XLV plus 628 pages. Vol. 2 Theology, 4 plus 640 pp. This exhaustive study of religion and science was Madame Blavatsky's first presentation of theosophy to the modern world. It is reproduced in photographic facsimile of the original edition, 1877, 2 volumes bound in one, cloth, complete with general index and supplementary topical index. American edition The Secret Doctrine, The Synthesis of Science, Religion, and Philosophy by H. P. Blavatsky Vol. I Cosmogenesis, Slay I plus 676 pages. Volume U Anthropogenesis, 14 plus 798 pages. A systematic development of theosophical teachings on cosmogenesis, anthropogenesis, symbolism, comparative religion, with extensive comparisons of ancient wisdom with scientific conceptions. Facsimile of original, 1888, edition, 2 volumes bound in one, cloth, complete with index, XXXPP. American edition index to The Secret Doctrine, all volume and page reference to the original edition, London 1888, and to the photographic facsimile reproduction, listed above. Reprint X plus 172 pages. American edition The Key to Theosophy, an exposition, in question and answer, of the ethics, science, and philosophy of theosophy by H. P. Blavatsky reprint of original edition, 1889, 15 plus 367 pages. Indian edition The Voice of the Silence, by H. P. Blavatsky, a blank verse rendition of chosen fragments from the Book of the Golden Precepts, belonging to the Contemplative or Mahayana, Yogacarya, school. Reprint of the original edition, 1889, 4 plus 79 pages, cloth. Indian edition Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, by H. P. Blavatsky reprint of the original, 1923, XXIV plus 149 pages, cloth. American edition A Modern Panarayan, by H. P. Blavatsky, a collection of fugitive fragments. American edition The Ocean of Theosophy by William Q. Judge, a comprehensive text on the theosophical philosophy by a co-founder of the theosophical movement, widely used as a text in study classes. Reprint of original edition, 1893, XY plus 182 pages. Indian edition The Bhagavad Gita rendered into English by William Q. Judge, an ancient dialogue of philosophical religion from the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. Cloth, 18 plus 133 pages. Indian edition Notes on the Bhagavad Gita by W. Q. Judge. Indian edition Letters That Have Helped Me by W. Q. Judge. American edition, and shorter Indian edition Forum Answers by William Q. Judge. Reprints from the Theosophical Forum. American edition The Friendly Philosopher, compiled from Letters and Talks by Robert Crosby, 415 pages, cloth. American edition Universal Theosophy by Robert Crosby, Indian edition 5 Years of Theosophy Essays selected from the Theosophist. American edition Order from Theosophy Company, Mysore, Private Limited, 4, Sir Krishna Rao Road, Bangalore 560,004 India.